It's been rumored over the last few years, but especially over the last few months, that Call of Duty Esports could be swapping over to 5v5 rather than what it's been known for the last decade as 4 versus 4. Of course, talking all the speculation and possible changes, I've got retired Call of Duty professional, current coach, E-United's own, Mr. Brian Saintt. What's going on today, buddy?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing pretty good. I know we've been talking about it, playing the Blackout beta. You been having a good time with that?
Yeah, dude, it turned out a lot better than I thought it was going to be. It kind of feels like a more refined version of PUBG, I'd say.
Yeah, it's like it seems to be like the overall consensus of the community is like, hey, this could be, essentially something really good, which we were all kind of hoping for.
Yeah,
But
no, I think it's gonna bring a lot to Call of Duty with a lot of
Right.
streamers and stuff. I think Doc's gonna be playing a lot, Shroud. That's
Yeah.
gonna bring a lot of viewership to COD.
Now, how's the United camp doing this offseason? You guys bracing until September 19th?
Yeah, pretty much. We haven't discussed anything as
Right.
of yet. We're kind of just all waiting for the announcement to see what happens there because I mean it can change a lot.
Definitely. Well, let's go ahead and dive straight in, of course. All right. So, Call of Duty over the last decade now, as we know, has remained as 4v4, despite the major esports being 5v5 or even 6v6 for Overwatch. Many esport titles, of course, have made that transition into what is typically known as the ideal esports format. Now, I feel as if Saintt, the main argument behind the entire idea of wanting to add that fifth man is to try and attract the public audience. As everyone noticed, Black Ops 4 is looking to switch public lobbies from the regular 6v6 now to 5v5. We've all seen the numbers. We've all seen the very small percentage that the competitive fan base has in comparison to the average Joe. We hardly even register on their radar for the most part. Do you think having the same format as public players would be the key to be better viewership, or at least would attract somewhat new viewers if that format were to match up?
I don't think so. I mean, I get where they can come from on that standpoint. You know, you kind of want to make it like as similar as possible, like transitioning from competitive to casual, but I just don't think the format works for Call of Duty.
Now, for me personally, and I want to hear your thoughts as well, I've always had the philosophy of any esport, but specifically Call of Duty, it needs to answer these two questions. First question, is it fun to play? Number two, is it fun to watch? And if it answers yes, then to me, competitively, I think it has a chance because players enjoy what they're playing. And if the players are enjoying themselves, then that only helps the audience grow too. Now, I feel like the issue, at least for me, as far as viewership is considered, hasn't necessarily been anything else but the game. I feel like most specifically, it's been the maps, at least in my particular opinion.
That's always been my issue. I think maps are the most important aspect of a competitive shooter.
Because I know a lot of people, and I've been bringing this up too, not many people know how many competitive maps have actually existed over the last two titles. Because, in Infinite Warfare, we had 6 total, and 2 of them were only played in one game mode, Crusher, Search, and Destroy, and Precinct Uplink. And then we thought, okay, well, World War II, we'll come into this. Of course, map vetoes are introduced, which kind of throws a wrench into things from time to time.
Limited the map pool in a sense because
Right.
it kind of just brought London Docks, Arden's Forest out every single series.
Exactly. But we only had 7 official maps this season, and 2 of them were only used in one game mode, Flak Tower CTF and USS Texas Search and Destroy. Next, you already answered the question for me, but what's your thoughts on the maps? Do you think that has a bigger impact than most people think?
Yeah, no, I mean, it always, for me, in any, FPS, maps have always been the most important thing. I mean, the gameplay obviously has to be good as well, but if the gameplay is lacking a little bit, I think it can be made up for if the maps are all really sound and just complete.
Right. Now, on terms of being a prior professional player, of course, and a guy who's been playing as long as you have, what would your initial thoughts be on seeing 2 extra players running around in game?
It would just be way too chaotic. I mean, comms in Call of Duty are already out of control. I mean, you look at pretty much any hardpoint game, you're gonna have someone getting upwards of 40, 50 kills. Even some people get 55, 60 at times. And can you imagine how that'd be with 1 or 2 extra players on the map? It would just be way too chaotic. I mean, with other games, I think they're a lot slower. Call of Duty is just way too fast paced for the whole 5v5 argument.
Now that you're playing the Black Ops 4 beta, of course the multiplayer beta, I know Blackout's going on right now, but specifically, when we got to play multiplayer for, those few weekends, how did at least public 5v5 feel for you? On the maps given, of course, there wasn't a whole lot of time to really test things, but did it feel pretty good? Did it seem as if it could have potential in some way?
I mean, pubs are always 6v6. When you go in the pubs, you kind of just want to run around and get as many kills as possible. So, I mean, it felt a little bit slower in a sense, but watching wager challenges and playing a few of them actually, I mean, the S&D meta kind of just became 5 stack and just rush something together because they can't do anything if you have 5 people running at them.
Now, I want to talk to you quickly on the role discussion as well. If 5v5 were to come about, what fifth role do you think could be implemented? Because I've personally thought, on terms of World War II, maybe you add like a second flex, maybe another main AR, depending on certain maps. What would be your thoughts on the fifth player's role if it were to maybe match up something similar to World War II, or even if you have any opinions on Black Ops 4, how the role situation would work out? What do you think that fifth player could be?
I think it would be 3 subs, 2 ARs for sure.
3 subs?
Yeah.
Okay. Just because I feel like on the maps given, it was kind of dependent on what you liked, but I feel like the subs were already really good early. Then they had to go through a few patches and trying to take care of those and whatnot. But I feel like a flex could be a possible option. But yeah, I definitely agree. I think having the 3 subs to 2 ARs seems to kind of be at least what Call of Duty likes to direct toward at the end of a title.
Yeah, being able to pressure is always priority.
Yeah. Now, continuing the talk from roles, that fifth player comes with a lot of needs, as I'm sure as you definitely know now. I don't think many people realize, though, how serious this would be if 5v5 were introduced. Because, of course, we talk about the gameplay stuff. But outside of just gameplay, what are a few things that could really make things complicated for competitive if the switch was made to 5v5?
Well, I mean, every org would have to be salarying a whole nother player, and that's a lot of money every single year. I mean, it would force a lot of the mid to smaller tier orgs out of Call of Duty, and it would kind of just become really, really top heavy.
Yeah, because I feel like, at least for, the outside perspective, okay, it happens in the gameplay, but not a whole lot of people think about the organizations, how much, like, the salary that obviously comes into it. You got to, take in consideration if you are an amateur, semi-pro organization, you got to take in consideration flight, maybe in another hotel room. And then also, if you're getting winnings at these tournaments, that also comes into play as well because less prize pool.
So they would have to up the prize
Right.
pools 100% if they even did the whole 5v5 thing. It'd be unfair to the players.
I'm glad that you mentioned it, though, because one thing that really worries me a lot about the idea of 5 versus 5 is how the AM/semi-pro scene would react to this. Because, I mean, some teams can barely send a team of 4. Now a team of 5, with all things considered, we talk about the flight, we talk about the hotel room, et cetera, et cetera. I really feel as if the AM scene could see quite a few negatives if they aren't able to afford as much.
Yeah, I think it would definitely be a big hit. I mean, however, I do think a lot of orgs in the AM scene have been very generous to players. I think a lot of teams got funding when they necessarily didn't even deserve it. I think there's like a lot of teams that get full funding when they honestly shouldn't be. So I don't know. It's a weird argument, but I think it would definitely limit the number of teams that show up to events.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I'm a little bit worried about as well. Like we all obviously like the main discussion is like, okay, is franchising going to come in? Is that the reason why we're potentially could be switching to 5v5, et cetera? But I don't know. I feel like that could really hamper on the 5 or the amateur scene, especially if 5v5 was introduced, and especially this quick too. I feel like the turnaround would be very fast. All things considered, having the extra player added to an organization, all the things that come along with it. But do you think the turnaround would be much too fast, or do you think that maybe franchising or marketing, it could be worth it heading into Black Ops 4?
I mean, I don't think franchising would happen next year, not at all. I mean, it would have to be something planned out in advance. I think if franchising ever did happen, it would be the year after this one. I think they kind of want to see what happens this year before they go along that route. But even with franchising, I think fours is completely fine. If you're going to franchise, I don't think you necessarily need an extra player.
Yeah. Now, I want to hear your thoughts on this because this has been not necessarily a reoccurring thing on the Reddit, but there's been a few people who have been kind of discussing this and talking about it and saying thoughts on expanding the league. That's also been a topic, like I said, that people have been throwing around saying, don't increase it to 5v5. If you want to have more players involved, just expand the league. That's what we need, apparently, is what a lot of people think. What's your take on that? Do you think maybe a league expansion could be possible?
Yeah, no, I agree with that a lot more than adding an extra player. I think adding like 4 more teams to the league would be pretty sufficient. I mean, a 16-team league is already fairly big, but I think quite a few teams that have the skill level and the caliber to compete with the top teams kind of get left out, whether it be going through like an online tournament and not making it through there, et cetera, because I think like Lightning Pandas, E6, Ghost, and there was a few other teams as well that did well at champs. I mean, Elevate did well, Vitality did well. There was a few teams that missed out in the league that definitely had the ability to compete with all those league teams, and it's a shame that those teams just don't get to play in the league, barring some circumstances.
Yeah, I hope that I know the whole talk is kind of around franchising at the moment, but if there were something to be done, like we talked about, like Overwatch has contenders, there's obviously, minor leagues and whatnot that can occur. I really hope that there would be some type of, kind of standstill, because of course it does affect the amateur / semi-pro scene. But as you mentioned, those guys who are kind of on the bubble, just maybe not being in the pro league, just off by a few, they need to have something to kind of keep their interest. They need to be able to kind of fund themselves being on that bubble, having the opportunity. You could even argue some guys could have been in the league in turn for some others who possibly were in. But I definitely agree. I think something should be done in some way, but I don't know if that's the way of a semi-pro league, if that's the way of just more tournaments, or what really would be the case. But what's your thoughts on guys in the bubble and what they should be maybe even expecting heading into September 19th?
I mean, I don't even know what to expect coming September 19th, but with those teams, I mean, it's weird because there's only like 6 open events or so a year, and then you have champs as well. So I mean, if those teams don't make the league, they're kind of just sitting around for like 4 months in total with like the S1, S2, and it hurts them a lot too because they're not really ever getting practices for some top pro teams. Because I know like Lightning Pandas, Ghosts, all of them are really good, but it's still really hard for those teams to get scrims against pro teams because most pro teams just want to scrim other teams in the league. That's just what it comes down to, even though those teams are just as good.
Now, I'm going to ask you a few outside questions really quick. Of course, relating to 5v5, we talk about the roster moves. Do you think teams should be holding off to make changes until the announcement? Because, of course, we're hearing rumors about Optic Gaming. We're seeing Hunter T obviously kind of enter into the space. But do you think teams should maybe be holding off on those roster moves? Or there's been a lot of arguments as well saying, hey, they don't want to get left in the dust. They don't want to be, standing there while the changes are happening. Do you think the changes are happening too soon?
Yeah, I do think they're happening too soon. I do get being proactive and getting the players on your team when you can. I mean, 100T did kind of what they had to do. They had to get Kenny and Pharaoh out of their contracts like right when they had the ability to. So they made a good move there, but I think most teams are kind of just waiting around for the announcement because if you get stuck with like you pay like some big buyout or something for like a star player, then you find out it goes 5v5, like what are you going to do for the 5th spot? You're going to have to settle for like a real mid to low tier player because you're not going to have the funds or resources to acquire like a big name player in today's current landscape.
Right. Now, I want to hear your opinions really quickly on just 2 rosters. Of course, we already talked about Optic Gaming, 100T. What's your initial take on the rumored teams that are obviously occurring? I mean, you could argue that the 4th has been rumored, at least for the 100T side, to be maybe a guy like JCat, maybe a guy like Karma. Of course, for Optic Gaming, the rumored lineup happens to be Scump, Crim6, TJ, and Dashy. What are your thoughts on both of those teams?
I mean, I think 100T have a really good base with what they have now. I don't know who they could pick up as their 4th. I don't know if like Cap or even Karma. I think Karma could be a decent fit. I don't know about Cap though because they already have Pharaoh as a flex, Octane as a main AR, and then Kenny as a main sub. So I think they would need more sub pressure. But I think they do have the tools to build something really good there. And when I heard the rumored Optic roster the first time, it sounded a little weird. But the more I think about it, I think it has the potential. Dash E has an insane shot. He showed what he can do last year, although he's never played in like a top 4 situation at a tournament. I don't even know if he's ever placed top 8. Actually, I think he maybe has
I
once.
don't believe so, but
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he's
yeah.
only ever gone like top 12, top 16. So it'd be cool to see him um play in a high pressure situation. But with that whole roster, I do think they have the pieces. It just comes down to if Scump and Krim are like enjoying the game and grinding the game because when they're putting in the work and the effort, they're going to be 2 top players regardless.
Yeah, definitely. Well, of course, guys, you can follow Saintt on Twitter and Twitch at Brian Saintt. Thanks so much for joining me today, buddy.